ready to join the Pondercast world tonight? This is a good thing. I can't believe that I'm actually really standing here. This is kind of a bit of a dreamy dream after finishing the Signal last year and in this place, and then seeing it all come together magically because of all kinds of wonderful people here. It is kind of astounding. So Joshua and I are like, this adventure, this Pondercast adventure just keeps getting stranger all the time. We've just launched our first Pondercast album, which is music, original music by Joshua from the first season that we've been bringing with us on tour. And there is merch, like there are actually physical things that exist that are about Pondercast now, which is wild. And you might notice too on the merch table that Joshua has this wonderful project called Crossworlds, and it's like a sonic drama. And it's a book with illustrations and an album. You'll find that there. And the way that this thing has grown, we're just launching a new partnership with a project called Collab Project out of Ottawa. And Joshua and myself and Ty Johnston, who does all the design and everything else, our other partner, we're creating content for these people. And Collab is a digital space for people who use medicinal cannabis for 1,000 different reasons. So we're kicking off our collaboration with them on this tour, and we're really stoked about that. And if you want more information, there's a card on the table, so check it out. I think we're all a bit curious about this brave new world. So what have you signed up for tonight? A live recording of a podcast. I'm guessing that you usually listen at home, maybe late at night or maybe in the car, and we think together about crazy thoughts that come up or dark thoughts that tend to creep into our nights, all accompanied by Joshua Van Tassel's music. But here we are all together. I am no longer a disembodied voice. I am standing in front of you. Deal with it. Frankly, I'm dealing with it because it's difficult, because normally when I record, I am standing in my boyfriend's daughter's walk-in closet. And I am surrounded by far too many clothes and far too many pairs of shoes, trying to get into this headspace to record Pondercast. So I'm rather alarmed at what I'm looking at here this evening. After the podcast ends, I'm going to answer questions here. So please think about anything you've ever wanted to ask about anything and ask it. Ask it, because if you don't, I'm going to ask you questions. And then we can all have a drink together and then continue talking. So you're going to hear many strange and wonderful sounds coming from Joshua's equipment tonight. And because this is a show about the ocean, a lot of the music that you hear and the samples are actually created from real things, from the sound of waves, underwater sounds, whale sounds, foghorns, ships. See if you can pick them out. Okay, are we ready to do this? I'm Laurie Brown. Let's Pondercast. My family comes from Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, and my ancestors were boat builders. And even though my parents moved to Toronto and then had me and my sister, every summer we were back in Nova Scotia. And that's where I spent every summer of my life. That is where family is. That is where I now have a home on the Bay of Fundy. And that is the landscape that I see in my head when I think home. And the view that I conjure up is a beach. My beach. It's a beach I know best. It's a beach I've been to in every season of every year of my life. Bundled up in boots and coats and walking in the winter, striding down the beach, trying to get ahead of the wind. And oh my God, I forgot a Kleenex again. And why didn't I bring more plastic bags to pick up more plastic crap on the beach? But this is my best place. And I know that you have yours too. That nose-dripping, freezing, soggy place is home. It's funny that it's not a building, right? It's not a house. But it's people clustered at a shoreline. I called this show, Darwin is Wrong. We came from the sea. Okay, he wasn't completely wrong. But he may be wrongish. And in my efforts tonight to take you on a voyage, to help to pin to the mat that pull we feel to the Atlantic Ocean, I'm willing to hang myself out to dry on a little bit of sketchy new science, just to prove a point. But not everyone feels that pull, right, of the ocean. Some people are mountain people. Some people are prairie people. There are woods people. There are Costco people. But I don't get that. I am an ocean person, and that is my home. But even among those who live by the ocean, I'm amazed to meet neighbors, people I know, who haven't been to the beach in years and have never gone down to the wharf. They never go down. It's like they live with their backs to the ocean. My Aunt Mary faces the ocean every moment she can get. And you know that when you open the trunk of her car, because there's always a lawn chair, a blanket, a towel, a bathing suit, and a hat in there. She's always driving somewhere and sees a beach or a nice spot and pulls over like this, and then it's all out of the trunk, and she's down there, either to have a nap on the beach or to have a walk. And I remember loads of car rides with my grandfather. And there were always a set of binoculars in the back of the car. And even after he was way too old to climb over the dunes to get down onto the beach, he would drive to the beach, roll down the windows, take out the binoculars and scan the horizon, and always eat an apple. So let's face the ocean tonight and think about why it feels like home. Let us fathom the unfathomable. Now, this is a fathom. Actually, it's a rather girlish version of a fathom. I think I'm about 6 inches short on this. And the original meaning of fathom meant to get your arms around something, to embrace something. And then it turned and it became a thing about depth. It went sideways. But on this episode of Pondercast, let's do both. Let's embrace and go deep. Deep into the blue. Or is it green or gray or is it muddy? It seems to change every minute. A good reason why you got to keep your eye on it. But mostly it is a million shades of blue. Our planet's primary color, blue above and blue below, and in the beginning there is blue, and in the end there will be blue, and in between every creature with eyes will be bathed in blue. And so does our attraction to the water have something to do with the color blue? What does blue do to us? Ask a painter. Kandinsky said that blue has this peculiar and almost indescribable effect on the eye. it evokes a kind of contradiction between excitement and repose. It's a color that includes everything. It's a totally different feeling than when you turn around and look at the land. You've got a beautiful green landscape in front of you, and that brings contentment, a beautiful green earthly contentment. But blue for miles and miles and miles, brings a heightened feeling of, maybe it's not a feeling, maybe it's an energy instead. I just know I want to face that way. We love to contemplate blue, not because it advances to us, but because it draws us after it. Goethe said that the power of profound meaning is in blue, and the darker the blue is, the more time we spend with it. Dark blue is the color of depth, and that's why it pulls us in. There aren't many things these days that ask us to go deeper, but the deep blue of the ocean does. You are heading out on the water. You finally boarded the ferry, parked the car, gathered all your stuff, and headed upstairs to find a place to sit. The ferry starts to vibrate and rumble, and it pulls away from the wharf. You get out on the deck to watch the town disappear. There it goes. And still you stay outside in the wind, hair constantly all over your face, until you can see the last little bit of shoreline go. No more land. Looking down over the side of the steel hull coated in how many layers of white paint? Dotted with rust. You try to focus on the swirling waters that flow by, the black blue of the hollows, the white of cresting waves. How deep is this water? How deep is this blue? We stand here on the eastern edge of the country and we look east. Is that east? Can you tell me? Am I pointing in the right direction? Is that it? Thank you. Local knowledge, it's so great. We stand here on the eastern edge of the country and we look east. Now, the rest of the world came first to this land from that direction. And at first, our indigenous people looked out and they saw a speck on the horizon line. And then that speck moved, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it turned into a ship. Norse longship, carrack, fishing boats, Victorian merchantman vessels, warships, 21st century ocean liners, and everyone who arrived here so generously spread their DNA around. How kind. Along with their culture, their traditions, and their religion. And I would guess that most of us in this room came from that horizon line for 1,000 different reasons. Adventure, escape, survival, money, work, a better life, a different life. And they got here first because of one reason. And that's because the Atlantic is smaller than the Pacific. Not because they were smarter or more adventurous or had better ships, but just because of the smaller, more manageable size of the Atlantic Ocean. Can you imagine this country today if the size of the Atlantic and Pacific were switched and Asian explorers and settlers came from the Far East and landed in BC first? How things would be different? Like everything would be different. They did a study with Japanese kids and Canadian kids in grade 1, and they asked them to draw a picture with a couple objects in it and a horizon line. That was it. They collected all the pictures and they looked at them and they realized that Japanese children drew the horizon line 19% higher than the Canadian kids. What does this mean? The conclusions ran that East Asians have a more holistic view of life. They see a bigger picture and believe that events are caused by external forces beyond their control. Why? Because of the higher horizon lines, they had more things in their pictures. The Western kids, the Canadian kids, we have a more analytic approach, and we believe that we are the primary cause of events in our world because their pictures just had a couple of objects on them and they were focused. There was hardly any detail. All that information from a horizon line, it is loaded with meaning. So how would that difference play out if the size of the two oceans was reversed and their explorers landed here first? I mean, would they have treated our indigenous people differently? Would there have been slavery on this continent? What kind of resistance would they have met? Who would have fought them for it? You know, if history happened that way, you would not be here tonight. You probably wouldn't even be. Oh, there might be some version of you sitting in a pub in England whining on about Brexit tonight. Or maybe you'd be in Scandinavia planning a mid-career change to become a doctor and have it fully funded by the government. Or you'd be in Portugal fishing. Who knows? But you'd be beyond that horizon line, the one that we've spent so much time looking at. And oh my God, that's what I miss when I'm in Toronto. My eyes can't go far enough. There's a brick wall 15 feet away from me. Or maybe it's the house across the street. But on a normal day, I don't do much better than that. I want my eyes to go long. We crave a good horizon line when we are landlocked. Have you heard the story of the fisherman whose daughter convinced him when he retired that he needed to come and live with her in Alberta? And she'd get him a one-bedroom apartment. And so he did it, and she came to visit him, and he had taken a blue crayon, and he had drawn a blue line around every room that he was in. Of course, if he was Japanese, he would have drawn it 19% higher. But such is the power of the horizon line. We load it with significance, and we struggle to fathom the immensity of the sky above and the sea below, and then try to locate ourselves somewhere in between. It is at the horizon line that we search for an intimacy with distance. And that meeting place of the two constants in our life, the sea and sky, staring at the horizon line, it sets in motion this powerful physiological response. Everything on the inside slows down. Your breathing slows, your heart slows, your mind slows down. The whole central nervous system gears down and turns on different pathways. I mean, you can feel it. Sort of new areas of your brain are coming online as you go long and wide with that impossibly big space in front of you. You wake up and you calm down, blue, and the brain just keeps opening and opening to take in more space as you stare at where the edge of the planet meets the edge of the universe. And as the world gets bigger and bigger, you get smaller and smaller and oh so delightfully insignificant, and the flotsam and jetsam of your day just shrinks. Is that a more holistic view of the world? Maybe. We just know how it feels, and it's a relief. Take away the horizon line, and then things get truly strange and weird. Fog. Okay, let's talk about what it does to your hair. Harbor hair. Oh my God. I put out a call to people on Facebook. What do you do about harbor hair? And people of all hair stripes seem to be commenting and telling me what the best thing is. And they said, you just need to embrace the curls. Go big and just, let your hair go curly. I said, you get curls? Like, if my hair went curly, that would be fantastic. That's great. No. I turn into a sea witch. It's like some kind of malevolent, magical being, and it's truly scary. I wouldn't be complaining about harbor hair if I got friggin' curls. So I got a few bits of advice, and one was get a hat. And then from my sister, I loved hers. It was just hide. Yeah, she's seen me at the beach. But, if you're a person who lives right next to the sea, you probably, maybe in your deepest, darkest self, might admit that actually you kind of sort of love the fog and say, screw the hair. Such is the power of the ocean. And I just love the beach in the fog. and you can hear the open ocean before you can see it. And there's a soft, sleepy swell sound. And like you, it seems the ocean loves being wrapped in this blanket of fog. There is a dreamy quality to a day of fog, an invitation to step out of the world ruled by the sun, with all its hard, sharp edges and bright colors, and just ease into something more fluid and surreal. The earth and the sky just dissolve together, leaving everything and everyone to float in this wet, heavy air. The horizon line is gone. And people are different on foggy days. This is a day when your thoughts demand attention. Strange thoughts, what-if thoughts. The tide is high, just at the turn. No wonder it sounds so full and content. And you can only see about 100 yards out on the water, and on this windless day, it's the absence of sound that makes an impression. Looking out into that dense fog, it's hard, it's impossible to imagine that there are people out there in boats. There are scallop boats out there, and the fishermen are standing, shucking scallops over the side of the boat, watching the shells float away in the fog like a crooked line of bread and butter plates. The foghorn. I miss the foghorn in Nova Scotia. Its piercing yelp sort of made the silence in between feel like a shocking vacuum. And there is such an ache in that sound, a yearning for what is missing. And the foghorn just struggling to reach something that has drifted just too far out, like something on the edge of your memory. The foghorn sounds like the final attempt to bring back what threatens to be lost out there in the invisible floating world. I have a friend whose father was an officer in the British merchant navy in the 1940s and the 1950s. And his name was David Wilkinson, and he was the first engineer on the Queen Mary. And he had many decades at sea staring at the horizon line. And because, of course, space was a premium in his cabin, he couldn't bring the books on board that he wanted to read. So he figured that slim volumes of poetry were the way to go. And in ports around the world, in Cape Town and Sydney and New York and Vancouver, he would walk to his favorite bookstore and he would buy one slim volume of poetry and take it back to sea with him. And to squeeze the most out of every poem and every page at sea, David would memorize all these poems. As he went about his work, repeating lines, and on his time off, in his cabin, on deck, staring out at the endless repeating crests and hollows of waves, he memorized his poems. And such was his understanding and depth of knowledge of these poems that on his 90th birthday, I took my recording equipment to him and set it up and had him recite poetry to me. And it was 50 years after he had memorized these poems, and he spoke for over an hour. It was T.S. Eliot and Longfellow and Frost and W.H. Auden and Shakespeare, and it felt to me that I could just see the power of repetition said over and over and over again until these poems were so much about who he was.
When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my state. Wishing to be like one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I must and most enjoy contented less. And with these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on me and then my state, like unto the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. And thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
Repetition is the mother of all learning. Now that is a really old saying that you don't hear very much anymore. Today we teach things once and we're expected to retain them, to keep it on file. But haven't you noticed that very little sticks on initial application? It's like teaching your child to say thank you. That didn't happen just once, did it? Or you remembering important things like don't sweat the small stuff. How often do you have to be reminded of that? Keeping what you know is worthwhile and important at the front of your brain is a constant battle. I mean, important lessons like be kinder, be more compassionate, be forgiving. And flossing. What happens to flossing? It's gone. Before modern education took off, the only school in town was church, and religions of the world out to teach us about ethics and purpose and living a more compassionate life. Oh, they were obsessed with repetition. A Muslim repeats the central tenets of Islam 5 times a day. A Benedictine monk reads scripture 7 times a day. An Orthodox Jew, 300 days of the year are marked out for commemoration and ritual repetition of ideas in the Torah. And a Zen priest might meditate up to 12 times a day. But I think religions understood something about us that education misses in its teach it once and move on efficiency. And that's that Our brains are sieves. They are not buckets. Many of us are done with religion, but maybe we shouldn't be done with what religions knew so well about us, that nothing sticks unless we return to it again and again. And we need to be reminded. I think we still need repetition. We should build our own rituals. We should create our own catechism, memorize our own poems. We need to old school ourselves daily. Music is built on repetition. Oh my God, think about your favorite song. How many times have you heard that? And didn't it get better each time that you heard it repeated? I mean, that's one place where memorization still exists big time in the music that we love. I mean, you know all the words to your favorite songs. You know them so well. You know that song so well that you don't even have to hear it anymore. You can just run the whole thing in your head. And sometimes it runs when you don't even want it to run, and it becomes very annoying. I call that carpal tunnel syndrome. But repetition in the structure of music is the basis of all music. And it does something magical. Repetition allows us to mess with time. By repeating a little musical gesture or a moment, it breaks it open, and we are given the opportunity to know it better. Music stretches time, and no other form of art so passionately embraces repetition as our music. In fact, anything is made musical just by the sheer fact of repeating it again and again and again and again. Now, all this repetition brings us to waves, because waves, like music, they only exist in motion. And that sound is a big part of what pulls us to the shoreline. The sound of waves is an acoustic oasis. Oasis is a weird word to put with it, because actually these things can be really, really loud, but their repetition and their rhythm mesmerize us. And they wrap us in sound, drowning our ears with so much information. They send thousands of impulses to our brain, so many of them that we have to give up trying to pick out their individual frequencies, and instead we process the sound of waves as a single broadband blanket of sound. In what book did I read about a sea captain who, when he was home on land, had to hire a young boy every night and had that boy throw buckets of water against the side of his house so he could sleep at night because he had to have the sound of waves? Our love of the sound of waves could also be about what we're not hearing while we're listening to the waves, right? Traffic, leaf blowers, chainsaws, the backup beeps on construction vehicles. That's all gone. When the sound of waves takes over, we become less distracted, and the brain relaxes, and we focus. And 15 minutes by the ocean listening to waves, and your stress hormones drop 20 to 30%. But I don't need to tell you that. You know that. You can feel it. You feel that everything changes standing by the sea. It's the horizon line, it's the color, it's the sound. And science has a name for this exquisite feeling. It's called a blue mind. Underneath the waves, the ocean is a cathedral for sound. Sound travels 5 times faster under the water. It's built for song and sound. The loudest sound made by any animal, the blue whale, louder than a jet engine, heard for hundreds of miles underwater. And that song has sequence and timbre and rhythm and meaning, and they live in a cathedral of sound. But the whales only want to talk to each other. And that's why whales are silent at the surface. They don't want our attention. I wonder if it was always like that. And if you were to actually be in the water with a whale, with their superpowers, their sonar abilities, they would look right through you. They would see your bones and your organs. They would know your temperature. They would know if your temperature changed and would register that as a kind of emotional change in you. They register your every move, your every dimension, inside and out, your density, your fingernails, and your hair. But very few of us get that underwater encounter, meeting them in their home. I mean, mostly we peer over the side of a whale-watching boat, hoping they're going to meet us on the surface where they are mute and turn watchful. But to have the chance to look into that single eye breaking above the water is so powerful. To be seen by a whale and to acknowledge each other. And when that moment happened to me, very unexpectedly, I had this overwhelming urge to say, I'm sorry. But to feel a deep affinity with a whale, I don't think is so strange. I mean, I felt like I was looking at a creature not as intelligent as we are, but smarter. Like just on our relative brain size alone, we should be allies. I mean, we're not. There was a time when when crews on whaling ships would tell stories about whale calves trying to suckle on the hulls of whaling ships. But what if our affinity with these ancient leviathans is more than a romantic attraction? What if there is something more in that knowing look? What if Darwin was wrong? And what if, when we came down from the trees, instead of standing upright in the savannah, what if we went into the water? No one wants to mess with Darwin. I get it. But why shouldn't his theory evolve just like everything else? So we can have a little moment of silence for the Savannah Theory. It's been losing ground since the mid-90s, and because we now know that before the Savannah was the Savannah, it was flooded. It was water. The new idea is we came down from the trees and there was water. It's called the aquatic ape theory. And we stood up, not because we wanted to gaze over the tall grasses, but because we learned how to wade out into the water and forage for food. And our diet changed as we did this, and all of a sudden we had all these rich fatty acids, and bingo, our brain started to grow. And when you look at it, I mean, really, we can't fly, we cannot run as fast as land animals, we lack hair or fur to keep us warm, but we can swim, we can dive, and our wide shoulders are more suited to swimming than running. And our hairless bodies help us there. And other terrestrial mammals cannot hold their breath, and we instinctively know how to do that. Leftover webbed fingers? But even our organs contain a memory of the sea. Our kidneys have evolved to deal with all this excess salt that came with foraging underwater. And our blubber is 10 times more than that of other primates. We are much closer in fat or blubber content to that of a fin whale. Cut us open, and the fat stays attached to the skin, just like a whale. And blubber makes no sense for a hunter trying to run across the savannah, but oh so useful for an aquatic ape foraging and swimming in the sea. And now we have a neuron in our brain that is exactly the same as the neuron in a humpback whale. And this has started this new idea that we evolved with whales side by side in very similar ways. Allies with shared history in the ocean. 3/4 of the million species in the sea are yet to be described, and 1/3 remain completely unknown to science. My God, the sea is still very much a mystery. And mystery is endlessly, agelessly compelling. So why does something that is so much of a mystery feel like home? Standing at the shore, is that pull we feel, is that some ancient DNA pulling taut? The ocean is comforting and dangerous. It is both escape and return. In its blueness, it excites and calms. The ocean is not with us, nor is it against us. It gives life and it takes it away. It feels like home, yet it's uninhabitable for us. We skim precariously on the surface and cluster along its shoreline. We know so little about it, yet for those of us lucky enough to live close, we know it's a big part of who we are. Maybe that's because we find ourselves equally as mysterious as the ocean. I go to the ocean when I have lost the plot. The sea is like a giant, wet, lost and found for me. When I am overwhelmed or confused or anxious, I somehow think that by going and staring at the horizon line, the sea is going to offer me some clarity. The sea is a searching place. And it's by the ocean where we meet bits of ourselves that in our regular daily lives, those bits just don't show up. But by the water, with the air and the wind and looking long, suddenly parts of us that have been shoved under or ignored or disavowed, they resurface. Our bruised bits reappear. And by the sea is where our whole selves show up. And we stare ahead at the horizon line and we turn over memories and plans and regrets and happiness and sadness, just feeling it all. And watching those waves roll in, it's like our bloated worries and our excruciating, endless self-examinations just start to lose their power. And that shift can feel monumental. Feeling that small in the grand scheme of things, it gives us the ability for just a brief time to stand outside of ourselves. And that is the meaning of ecstasy, the sea's gift to us. No wonder we want to call this place home. What the ocean means to us in the end, I think we all know it's beyond language. It is totally beyond words. It is beyond us. It's beyond beautiful, because beauty seems to be a limited thing, and the ocean is limitless. It is sublime. And standing right at the edge of sublime, our minds attempt to fathom the unfathomable. And there's a kind of sorrow in our failure to get our arms around it, right? But there is profound meaning and joy in the attempt to grapple with the immensity of it. We can't stop trying. So I end with a question. Where is the place that holds you? Where is the place that makes you want to stay? Where is that place that makes you want to build your home beside? Thank you, St. John's. Joshua Van Tassel.